After a tough loss at Memphis, Miami returned home to take on the Pistons, but things didn't get any better despite the return of Victor Oladipo for his first appearance of the season. The Heat offense was lost all night without Jimmy Butler, and Detroit's Bojan Bogdanovic torched the Heat in the second half. We break down what went wrong, Oladipo's performance, and where Miami's season goes from here on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil, recording live from FTX Arena. Remember that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. The good news for the Heat is that Victor Oladipo made his season debut tonight. The bad news is that the Heat lost for the second night in a row, this time to the Pistons, 116-96. No Jimmy Butler, but Tyler Herro did score 34 points. Bam Adebayo, 21 and 15, but they didn't get much help. David, we're going to start by talking about the bad news before we get to some of our listener questions, and then Victor Oladipo's season debut. What went wrong for the Heat tonight?
Well, Eric Spoelstra talked about it after the game. He said Miami's offense just was lost all night, and basically they couldn't. They didn't have any flow to it, no rhythm. And as a result, their defense started to break down. They basically held their own defensively for most of the game, and then in the late second half, that's when Bojan Bogdanovic just absolutely went crazy, hitting every shot, contested or not. He was getting every open look he wanted, able to knock those down with ease. So to me, the biggest thing that I noticed was just, the lack of three-point shooting. They were disastrous from the three-point range earlier on, and as a result, their offense just, again, to Spo's point, absolutely no rhythm whatsoever. Without being able to kick it out to a competent three-point shooter, it just had no option offensively. Nobody was able to attack the paint with any kind of regularity, consistency, or strength without Jimmy Butler in the lineup. And despite Tyler's great offense, that was basically the only source of offense in the first half until eventually Bam wound up scoring as well.
Should mention no Jimmy Butler, no Gabe Vincent, no Dwayne Dedmon tonight on the second night of a back-to-back. But still, this was a Detroit Pistons team that came into tonight 29th ranked in defense, giving up the 29th most points, the second most points in the NBA in the paint. And the Heat just felt like they couldn't really get into any sort of rhythm offensively. Defensively, they weren't containing guys. I mean, you got Bojan Bogdanovic going for 31 points, and he's a good player, but to go 12 of 16 and just completely torch the Heat, I've got something I want to talk about later on with him. But you got 18 points from Alec Burks off the bench, 14 points from Saddiq Bey, 11 points from Corey Joseph. The bench has been such a huge issue for Miami. Even without Jimmy, the starting lineup, look, they didn't play great, unlike the game against Memphis, where the starters actually had a plus in that game. The starters were also a minus in tonight's game, too. But the bench was also really bad again. So for two nights in a row now, in a 48-hour period, the Miami Heat's bench has gone outscored 78-30. That's not a winning recipe, regardless of how good your starters are. And tonight, they just weren't getting anything from their starters either. For as disappointing as the Memphis loss was, David, I felt like this one was even worse. I know that's the second night of back-to-back. I know you were without Jimmy Butler. I understand all those things. But that shouldn't matter. This was a team that last year won games against better teams shorthanded. This team this year has won games shorthanded, just not at the same frequency. But the Pistons are really bad, and you should be able to win this game. And this one, coupled with the loss last night, the Heat are in a bad spot. Spo talked about this after the game. 5 nights ago, we're winning in Boston. We're all feeling good. And fast forward 5 days later, 2 bad losses later, and all of a sudden we're not feeling any good again.
No, absolutely. Look, I predicted a loss tonight, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I thought it was you could see patterns in the Memphis game that were reproduced today, not to mention, of course, specifically the bench production. And I think it's just a matter of the roster construction. You're asking players that, for all likelihood, should not be in the NBA or shouldn't be playing significant minutes. Haywood Highsmith has been a fun spark, and we can talk about his defense as much as we'd like to, but he goes 0 for 3 on the night. Duncan Robinson has regressed completely. As much spark as he showed earlier in the season as far as a little versatility to his offensive repertoire, his confidence just looks shot. He just doesn't look like a factor out there. Only 5 points from him. Victor Oladipo was fine off the bench, but 9 points from him, that's just not going to cut it. And then you're asking guys like Jovic, Drew Smith in limited minutes. This is not a recipe conducive to winning basketball. And so on a night when you're asking guys like Caleb Martin, again, propelled into the starting lineup because you don't have any other option. It's power forwards, but You've got to get something from him. He's only producing 3 points. Kyle Lowry struggled today from the floor offensively. Max Strus was bad offensively, 4 of 11 from the floor for only 11 points. All these players are needed to contribute at a high level. It's just not going to get it done. If any one player doesn't play at a high level, then all of a sudden everything starts to fall apart, especially when the three-point shooting is as bad as it is.
Everything's got to go right for the Heat to win games this year, to your point. And that, you just can't expect everything to go right all the time. Even on a night where you're getting 34 points from Tyler Herro, I want to go back to Spo's comment in regards to the offense just functioning without flow, without rhythm.
Right.
And I don't think that was a direct shot at Tyler Herro, but it feels like it might have been a little bit of not necessarily, hey, Tyler Herro can't be going out and scoring 34 points. He did have, how many assists did Tyler have? He had 6 assists, which is fine on a night where he had 34 points and nobody else could make a shot. He probably could have had more than 6 assists if anybody made a shot. But I do think that between him and then Victor Oladipo just trying to find his flow, there was a portion there between the third and fourth quarter where it felt like, and I tweeted this during the game, like it was a race between who could take the shot the fastest between Tyler and Victor Oladipo. And they just would go down, take a few dribbles, and then chuck up a shot. For Tyler, it was working. For Victor Oladipo, you understand he's trying to shake the rust off. But can the offense be what it needs to be and also Tyler Herro score 34 points on a night? Is kind of my question.
Well, I think so, because we've seen the evolution from him in terms of his passing and playmaking. 6 assists, that's pretty good considering where Tyler was earlier in the season. And to your point earlier, like he probably would have had more if somebody else is connecting for the perimeter. I don't think I saw him over-dribbling tonight the way I had earlier this season. And he had to take...
And even if he did, somebody had to do something.
There was nobody else capable out there. I mean, you're getting 1 of 7 shooting from Caleb Martin, 1 of 6 from Lowry, 4 of 11 again from Strus. Yeah. That's not great. Like, you're not going anywhere. And Adebayo, look, he had a lot of his points later in the game. But earlier on, he struggled against Detroit's length. He just wasn't able. His touch around the basket was so dominant over the last couple of weeks, where he had one of, I think, perhaps the best stretch of his career. He seems to have lost that against Memphis, and he certainly lost it against Detroit as well, despite the 21 points.
5 turnovers was not good. 5 of Miami's 15 turnovers from Bam Adebayo. Let's just do a quick blame pie, because we're going to do listener questions here in a minute. Kyle Lowry, should mention him, 1 of 6 overall, 1 of 5 from three-point range. And the percentages is not even what I'm worried about. The fact that you only take 6 shots on a night where Jimmy Butler was not available. I know that Tyler had it going. I know that Bam had it going. But you took 6 shots in 34 minutes, and Nikola Jovic took 4 shots in 9 minutes. That says a lot about Jovic and Kyle Lowry to different degrees. But, look, I don't need to harp on Kyle Lowry here, but...
He shouldn't even have been playing.
He probably shouldn't have been playing. I understand Gabe Vincent wasn't available. I don't know if they did rock, paper, scissors before the night to see which point guard didn't have to play tonight. But I just... It's kind of what you said earlier. If not everybody is doing... Like, Kyle Lowry is just, a week and a half away from having his best stretch of the season. Bam Adebayo, 5 days away from having his best stretch of the season. Jimmy Butler, he's out again tonight after missing 13, whatever it was, straight games. That's kind of inexplainable to me, other than maybe that they just have a handshake agreement between him and the Heat that he doesn't play second nights of back-to-backs, which certainly could be possible at this stage. But... I would say, in terms of blame pie, if we wanted to just really quickly do it, Lowry, I would give probably 4 pieces. Highsmith, 2 pieces.
A little high for Lowry. 3? 3 for him, 2 for Highsmith. Definitely Caleb. Unfortunately,
Caleb, he had a tough
3
night.
Points. He had a 3-pointer in the second half, but he was just missing everything earlier on. That was problematic. And again, Max, like, you're out there as a starter filling in for missing Jimmy Butler. You're not able to knock down those 3-point shots. He was 3 of 8. But again, those were where we had a little hot stretch there. That's not consistent enough. When he's getting those open looks earlier on, then all of a sudden the offense just fizzles out, it dissolves because he's not able to capitalize on those open looks.
Yeah.
That's not good enough.
Duncan gets 1 slice, and that gives us our 10. All right. Listener questions are next, including, do we have any ideas of how to fix Miami's bench? That's coming up next. But first, David, tell listeners about PrizePicks. Oh, no, I'm doing PrizePicks. All right. I'll tell listeners about PrizePicks. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do to play is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they're going to score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10x your money on any entry. And the best part, no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections that are available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, the World Cup, and so much more. Entries could be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy, safe, and fast withdrawals, and currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to theprizepicks.com to sign up today and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for the instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. We got Blame Pie out of the way. We usually do that in the second segment, but instead we're going to move over quickly to listener questions. We got a handful of them. This first one coming from Azam, who writes in, is the bench salvageable, or is having roughly 5 dead roster spots too much to overcome? In regards to those 5 dead roster spots, what are we talking about? We're talking about Udonis Haslem, unfortunately, not a rotation piece.
Highsmith.
Haywood Highsmith. Well, I mean, even just without that, you're looking at Omer Yurtseven is not a roster spot tonight. They only have 15 guys on the regular roster, so you don't have one of those. I do think that there's a point to that where, you know, you're without Yurtseven, you were without Oladipo all season long coming into it. Haslam is not somebody you expect to play every night. Jovic is not somebody you expect to play every night. And you just don't have somebody filling that 15th spot because you're trying to avoid the luxury tax. So you're basically relying on the same cast, mixing and matching depending on injuries and minutes availabilities and whatever all this stuff is, to just do something different. I know a lot of people will critique Spo's rotations, but at the end of the day, the players are the players. And to answer Azam's question, I don't know that the bench is salvageable if these are the players you're dealing with.
No, absolutely not. I think it's a great question. And knowing him, I do think he's including Highsmith and others. Just because, again, they shouldn't be NBA-level players. And it's unfair, but we talked about the roster construction going into the season, and we thought, well, maybe they'd have enough depth. Maybe you'd see another leap from a guy like Max or Duncan or somebody else. One of those players that you're counting on to be a mid-level contributor has to be able to step up and continue growing. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. And so you're also asking guys that are on that bottom tier, basically not realistic NBA players, to contribute on a nightly basis. That's not good enough. You're not going to get it done. And unfortunately, because of the roster construction, because you have a superstar like Jimmy Butler, who is not going to put up gaudy numbers on a regular basis, you're just not going to get that kind of production where you're counting on him to put up these big numbers like Boston or like Giannis in Milwaukee, where he's putting up these big numbers. And then occasionally you get a Pat Connaughton or somebody, a Grayson Allen, to step up and contribute on a regular basis. On this team, you would be expecting Grayson Allen to step up for 30 points like Caleb Martin or something like that.
Right.
That's not going to work. That's not going to work at the NBA level. So no, to Azam's question, it's absolutely not salvageable. You're going to have to make some kind of high-level replacements or a trade of some kind in order to just coalesce some of these players into one salvageable type player.
Yeah, like, you're right. Look, I just wrote it down. Omer Yurtseven, Udonis Haslem, Duncan Robinson, Victor Oladipo until tonight. Gabe Vincent didn't play. Dwayne Dedmon didn't play. You're asking a lot, like, to your point, of guys like Haywood Highsmith and the 27th pick in the draft, who hasn't even finished high school yet, Nikola Jovic, to just contribute for 9 minutes. For most of these games, Duncan Robinson is just a useless roster spot. Like, this team, unfortunately, is not deep. And I do think sometimes we confuse depth for just a lack of difference between your sort of middle tier on the roster with the end of the roster, right? Like, if your 9th guy is basically as good as your 14th guy, which seems to be the case for the Miami Heat, then all of a sudden you're deep. You're not deep. You actually lack depth. There's just no real difference between your 8th and 9th guy.
I would go a step further. I think your 5th guy is probably as good as your 14th guy in this roster. Who's your 5th guy on this roster?
Probably Caleb. I'd probably say your 6th or 7th guy.
Yeah, Caleb, who was waived by the Charlotte Hornets 2 years ago. We love Caleb Martin. We've talked about him a lot. He's shown an incredible spark. He's supposed to provide spark off the bench. That's where he's most effective.
He would be the 8th man on a real contending team. Yep. That's what he should be. And that's kind of what he was last year, and all of a sudden you're not anymore. Yep. And this team just has a talent deficit. It's right now not well constructed. It is trying to sort of band-aid over these losses of actual talent over the last few years with, hey, undrafted guy over here, work hard and be a rotation guy. To your point, Max Strus, Haywood Highsmith, Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, these would be great stories if they were the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guys on the roster. Instead, you're asking them to play starters minutes. Caleb Martin, 32 minutes tonight. Max Strus, 30 minutes tonight. Haywood Highsmith playing 28 minutes tonight. It's not sustainable. And right now, the Heat, it's just over and over again. Hey, we're healthy, now we're not healthy. Hey, we're healthy, now we're not healthy. We got the effort, now we don't have the effort. We're scoring well on offense, now we're not. Well, we're not containing on defense, and now we are. We're trending in the right direction, now we're not. What is this? It's the definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. And this is not just this year, David. This has been the case for the last 3 years to different degrees. This team broke down in the finals in the bubble. Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo got hurt. That's what happens because so much was asked of them. They break down the next year because of a lot of different reasons. They get swept by the Milwaukee Bucks. They break down by the time of Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, even though they were a shot away from making the finals. That team was broken and limping even to that point. Jimmy Butler not being able to play that entire series because of a knee issue. And now they've broken down just a little bit earlier this year. It's just the same thing over and over again.
Let's say you do turn things around or get some kind of steady and consistent thing. Again, I don't even know if it's realistic given what happened over the last 5 days. But you're playing Kyle Lowry 30-plus minutes a night as a 36 years old, 37 years old. It
should be
when is he going to break down? When is he going to break down? It's just a matter of when at this point, unfortunately.
Josh writes in, it seems like we're losing to teams from them outperforming us for 4 quarters. It feels like this team has no dominating factors or presence to other teams. How can we get back the teams dreading having to play us? So kind of 2 parts there. First of all, I would agree with Josh. It seems like it goes back to what you said earlier. Everything has to go right. Not only does everything have to go right, but this team has to work so hard to get those things to go right. Yep. And to do that over the course of 82 games, and you could say, we work harder and we're better conditioned than every other team in the NBA, and all that's great. And probably true but it's also true out of necessity, and that's not ideal. Sometimes, man, I kind of miss the days of the big 3 where it was just like, you know what, just coast for three quarters, and then just take over in the 4th quarter. Just get 3 steals and 3 dunks in a row. Next thing you know, you're up 6, and you're going home happy with a win. That is the better way to win over the course of the regular season, and then you turn it up a notch in the playoffs. The Heat have to play, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. They have to play like it's May to win in December, and that's just not a winning recipe.
No, nobody's scared of playing Miami at this point. Their defense isn't scary. Their offense is inconsistent. Who is the player that strikes fear into an opponent's heart? I don't know. I don't even know if Jimmy is that player.
The closest thing would be Jimmy. He is a guy who could drive into the paint and draw doubles and kick out the shooters, but even he's not doing that to the degree that a Giannis is. He's not drawing double teams 18 feet away from the basket the way that Kevin Durant is, or 30 feet away from the basket the way that Steph is. There's nobody on this team. I actually found, and the reason I wanted to include this is I found myself watching this game against a bad Detroit Pistons team as a reminder. I'm like, nobody is influencing anything. They're not dictating the terms of engagement. They're not drawing doubles. They're not striking fear in a bad Pistons team that should be fearful of everybody. And they just were not scared of this team. Maybe it could be Bam. Maybe it should have been Bam. But regardless if it is or it's not. And it hasn't been. And that's not really, again, it's not Bam's game. And at this point, it's unfair to expect them to. If he, like Max Strus, is being asked to do too much, his optimal role would be like Chris Bosh on the big 3 teams, where you're the 3rd guy and you're scoring 20 points a game and playing great defense, or 18 points a game and playing great defense. And you've got 2 guys in front of you who are available and dominating in the way that LeBron and D-Wade did. They've got Jimmy Butler. When he's available, he is that guy. They're just missing that other guy. They're missing that Giannis-type presence, that Joel Embiid-type presence, that Nikola Jokic-type presence, who is just your opposing coaches are laying awake at night trying to figure out how are we going to stop this guy. Nobody's thinking like that about this team.
And even Tyler.
No. Even Jimmy, when he's healthy, nobody thinks about him that way until you get to the playoffs.
You're right. Let's move on because
Okay.
I don't know how else to approach this question. The reality is that the roster just seems poorly constructed. Things don't go well, and it just seems like it implodes pretty quickly.
We'll do this one quickly. Johnny writes in, why does it seem like we're either playing iso ball or just throwing up threes? I have one stat for you, just sort of underscore that. The Heat are actually top 5 in the league in passes made per game, but they're below average in secondary assists. What that tells me is that this team just sort of moves the ball, passes the ball just to pass it. There's a lot of empty stuff happening offensively, and tonight we weren't even getting that empty stuff. But tonight it basically did feel like Tyler Herro, please save us, and ultimately he couldn't. And it goes back to Spo's comments earlier. It just felt like there was no rhythm.
No, you're right. Similarly to what we saw against the Memphis Grizzlies, they took 33 total field goals out of 77, 10 less than their opponent. Guess what? The Pistons hit 10 more shots. And I think that's just it. They're moving the ball around, a lot of passing, and then over-dribbling, looking for opportunities that don't come. Even when they do come in the painted area, what do? Typical Heat fashion, kicking it out to the perimeter for a bad shot that wasn't falling down. Only 31% on three-point shots tonight. So it's just, there's no offense, there's no flow to it. It just doesn't seem like there's any kind of purpose or intensity. And again, without that star player that's able to score at will, there's just not a lot of options for this Heat team.
Maybe they should trade for Bojan Bogdanovic. He could score at will. We're going to talk about that next. Plus, thoughts on Victor Oladipo's season debut here. But first, David, tell listeners about BetOnline.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. We'll get to our thoughts on Victor Oladipo's season debut, but quick observation from tonight's game. Bojan Bogdanovic hits the game-icing three-pointer with, felt like 3 minutes to go in the game. He ends up with 31 points on 12 of 16 shooting, 7 of 9 from three-point range. And what did I see happen? Pat Riley, in his usual seat right next to Andy Ellsberg, tapping Andy Ellsberg on the shoulder, and then getting up and walking away. Am I reading too much into it, or was he simply just asking Andy to scoot over so he can get out?
I think he was just letting him know, kind of like, okay, I'm not.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. All right, fair enough. Thoughts on Victor Oladipo's season debut?
If I had to give it a rating on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say it's a 5. Look, to Eric Spoelstra's point, and he was asked about it.
Don't we usually grade these things?
Sorry?
That's usually like a grade like F, D, C, B,
okay,
A.
I'll give it a C+.
All right, C+.
C+. And Eric Spoelstra spoke after the game about the human element. And I think that's important to consider, too, is the fact that he's out there, and that's great. That's fantastic to see him out there. He looked happy in his post-game press conference. Well, reasonably so. He was as upset as anybody else regarding the loss overall. But
happy for Oladipo when asked about that question.
He's out there, and that's important to consider. Having said all that, his performance was up and down, mostly down. He did have some bursts, mostly in the second half. He did seem like he remembered, oh, yeah, I am Victor Oladipo.
Yeah.
He can attack the paint, even though a lot of those shots weren't falling. Finished just 3 of 9 overall. No lift on the three-point shot, I will say that much. It looked really, really wonky. A couple of times, again, the offense somewhat rudderless, moving the ball around, finding a Victor Oladipo open in the corner as you drive into the paint for a wide-open opportunity. Instead, you spray it out to Victor Oladipo, only for him to shoot it somewhat out of rhythm and have the ball fall completely short of the rim. He shot at least 2 air balls on his 4 three-point attempts. So not a great overall look. Defensively, I don't think he was much of a factor. In fact, I would say he was actually pretty poor tonight, especially a bad fit on the zone defense because he just doesn't have that burst right now where you're constantly asking players to rotate, move quickly, close out on shooters. Wherever the ball is, that's where you gravitate towards. Oladipo, unfortunately, not being able to move as quickly as possible, just not a great fit for that zone defense. So you wonder whether or not that's going to be something we see in the future.
He checked in the first quarter alongside Kyle Lowry, Max Strus, Haywood Highsmith, and Nikola Jovic. So they immediately go to that zone, mostly because Jovic is in there instead of Bam. And I noticed the same things we talked about with Oladipo. Like strength-wise, he was fighting through screens, and that stuff was good. But you're right, he just doesn't have that first step right now, and that first step is as important offensively as it is defensively. where you need to have that first step in order to attack those closeouts, just like you have to have that first step to close out on the defensive end. So definitely noticed that same thing. Understandable given how much time he's had off. It's not a critique. It's just this is where we're at, and this is what we are asked to do.
The realistic assessment of players who've missed so much time over the last 3 years.
Did have a hard take in transition. Got fouled under the basket. Made both of his free throws. Got to the line again in a similar kind of transition take. Missed both of his free throws in that instance. He had a step-back three that rimmed out that actually looked kind of okay.
Yes.
And again, ended up rimming out. And then, his first field goal of the season was a three-pointer. Hit another drive and layup. He airballed a three, like you mentioned before. He did have a crossover that created some space, and then he hit that baseline, 16-foot jumper. So that was nice. So there's flashes. There was things you liked. There's things you need to see improving. The rust is he's gonna have to shake off some of this rust. That stuff's expected. But in terms of the rhythm stuff, that's also sort of a larger concern, because this was the issue with Victor Oladipo when he came back last year, was that sometimes he just hijacked the offense. He wasn't really a participant in the ball movement. He would just the ball would find him, and then he would try to prove that he was old Victor Oladipo with the ball. And you kind of get that sense all the time, is that he's still trying to, man, I still got it. I'm still old Victor Oladipo. And I think that there's going to have to be, if he's going to be a positive contributor long-term for this Heat team, that there's going to have to be a moment of clarity where he says, maybe I can be the old Victor Oladipo. Maybe that's still there for me. But right now, that's not what my team needs from me. And I'm going to play this role to the best I can instead of trying to prove that I can get back to this all-star level. I think there needs to be that mindset shift with him. But again, not trying to critique him, not trying to go too big picture. The biggest thing tonight is that he actually got on the court after not playing all season. And they're going to need him, because in terms of trying to fix this bench, he is the most talented guy coming off the bench.
That's what I was going to say, is actually, maybe he did somewhat hijack the offense. Who else is going to do it?
Right.
You're asking, again, these low-level bench players that probably shouldn't be playing on a night-to-night basis, and you're asking them to play alongside Oladipo, who's just working his way back, trying to fight through rust. And he's going to have to attack because nobody else did, similar to what we saw with Tyler in the starting lineup or the starting rotation. Somebody's got to take that shot. Might as well be me, because nobody else is making a damn shot. So I don't know. I mean, it might be different. I think the big X factor is always, when you're talking about this team ceiling, how far can Jimmy Butler take him? How well can Tyler and Victor Oladipo coexist playing alongside Jimmy Butler? And I think that's a big factor.
And not for nothing, but it's December 6th as we're recording this. Players are eligible to get traded December 15th. Victor Oladipo, in his case, is eligible to get traded January 15th because of the bird rights extension that he signed. But you got him back now. It was surprising when the injury report came out and he was listed as, he was upgraded to questionable. It feels like this might have been the time that they were looking at this homestand, ideally at the beginning of December, as a time where you would try to get Oladipo back on the court. He was back out there. He looked good. Spo saying after the game, look, the minutes were fine physically for him. He was in the gym afterwards, getting a lift after, so that's all a good sign. So you'll have to see it from Victor Oladipo. Hoping for the best, hoping he can stay healthy for the rest of the season. The Heat play the Clippers Thursday night, the Spurs Saturday night to wrap up this homestand. If you get 2 wins, you're still 2 games under 500. If I'm doing the math right, a game under 500. I was not doing the math right, per usual. You're a game under 500. That's better than being 3 games under 500. We will have another show for you tomorrow, and then we'll be recapping for you that Clippers game on Thursday night. But for now, that's it for us today. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.
Force be with you.